January 3rd, 2026. 2:01 a.m. Caracas time. American helicopters descend through darkness over Venezuela's capital, carrying Delta Force operators on what would become the most controversial military operation since the Bin Laden raid. Their target, Nicolás Maduro, the sitting president of Venezuela, protected by thousands of troops, Russian air defense systems, and Cuban intelligence operatives. In exactly 2 hours and 28 minutes, Maduro would be blindfolded aboard a U.S. warship, heading to face narco-terrorism charges in New York. But this operation didn't begin on January 3rd, and the story of how it happened reveals one of the most complex intelligence and military operations in modern history. This is Operation Absolute Resolve, the complete story of how America captured a head of state. The foundation was built months earlier in the shadows of Langley, Virginia. In August 2025, newly confirmed CIA Director John Ratcliffe received authorization from President Trump to conduct covert operations inside Venezuela. Within weeks, CIA operatives slipped across the Venezuelan border. Their mission was precise: track Maduro's every movement, map his security apparatus, identify vulnerabilities. The CIA team established surveillance across Caracas with the patience of predators. They documented where he slept each night, what routes his motorcade traveled, which restaurants he frequented. General Dan Caney, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, later revealed that American intelligence knew intimate details about Maduro's daily routine down to his meal preferences. But the CIA's most valuable asset wasn't electronic surveillance or satellites. It was a human source embedded within Maduro's inner circle. This source, whose identity remains classified, had penetrated the highest levels of Venezuelan power. They provided real-time intelligence directly to American handlers about Maduro's security protocols, guard rotation schedules, and most critically, where he would be sleeping on any given night. According to officials briefed on the operation, this human intelligence asset made the difference between a theoretical plan and one that could actually succeed. The intelligence picture became increasingly clear throughout fall 2025. Maduro rotated between safe houses, but maintained a primary residence at Fort Tiuna, Venezuela's largest military complex in the heart of Caracas. Within this fortress, Maduro had constructed a heavily reinforced residence featuring steel-reinforced doors, a panic room, and multiple escape routes designed to thwart exactly this type of operation. While CIA operatives gathered intelligence inside Venezuela, the United States began the largest military buildup in the Caribbean since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. In September 2025, the Pentagon deployed the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, to waters north of Venezuela. The Ford Carrier Strike Group brought FA-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, and E-2D Hawkeye early warning planes. Simultaneously, U.S. Southern Command positioned destroyers, cruisers, and amphibious assault ships throughout the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific. By late December, American forces in the region numbered approximately 15,000 personnel, far exceeding what counter-narcotics operations would require. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, known as the Night Stalkers, quietly deployed their specialized helicopters to forward operating bases. These elite aviators, based at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, are considered the finest helicopter pilots in the world, trained specifically for high-risk special operations insertions. Their aircraft included MH-60 Black Hawk variants modified for special operations, MH-47 Chinook heavy-lift helicopters, and MH-6 Little Bird attack helicopters. The Night Stalkers had flown the missions that captured Saddam Hussein and killed Osama bin Laden. Now they prepared for their most politically sensitive operation ever. F-22 Raptor stealth fighters deployed to Joint Base Langley Eustis began rotating through Puerto Rico. F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters from the Marine Corps also arrived in Puerto Rico. B-1B Lancer bombers from Dyess Air Force Base in Texas began flying missions over the Caribbean. The official justification was Operation Southern Spear, a counter-narcotics campaign targeting drug smuggling vessels. Since September, American forces had struck at least 35 suspected drug boats, but military analysts and foreign governments understood the true purpose. The assembled firepower far exceeded anything required for interdicting drug shipments. On November 21, 2025, President Trump picked up a secure telephone and placed a direct call to Nicolás Maduro. During a 15-minute conversation, Trump delivered an ultimatum that left no room for misinterpretation. Resign. Immediately, leave Venezuela with your family or face the consequences. Trump offered Maduro safe passage out of the country, suggesting exile in Russia or China, and reportedly offered to allow him to retain up to $200 million in personal assets. According to sources familiar with the call, Maduro seemed to waver, coming close to accepting before making demands that would prove unacceptable. Maduro demanded blanket amnesty for himself, his wife Cilia Flores, and approximately 100 top officials accused of drug trafficking, corruption, and human rights violations. He also insisted on maintaining some control over Venezuela's armed forces during any transition. Trump rejected these conditions, reportedly giving Maduro 1 week to leave Venezuela voluntarily. That deadline expired on Friday, November 28th. Maduro responded not with surrender, but with defiance. Speaking at Miraflores Palace on December the 1st, he told thousands of supporters that Venezuela wanted peace, but only peace with sovereignty, equality, and freedom. He declared his country would never accept what he called a slave's peace. Trump later recalled that Maduro came close to surrendering, adding that after the capture, the Venezuelan dictator surely wished he had taken the deal when it was offered. With diplomatic options exhausted, the Pentagon shifted into final preparation mode. At a classified facility in the United States, Delta Force operators practiced their assault on a full-scale replica of Maduro's residence, constructed based on CIA intelligence. This mock-up included the steel-reinforced doors, the layout of hallways and rooms, and the exact dimensions of the panic room. President Trump later described this replica, noting it featured all the same steel everywhere, replicating the fortress-like protection Maduro believed would save him. The operators rehearsed breach techniques, room-clearing procedures, and extraction protocols dozens of times until every movement became muscle memory. General Caney explained the preparation philosophy. They trained not to get it right, but to ensure they could not possibly get it wrong. Special equipment was prepared, including what Trump described as massive blowtorches, capable of cutting through the reinforced steel doors. The FBI's hostage rescue team was integrated to provide legal authority for formally arresting Maduro once Delta Force secured him. This allowed the administration to characterize the mission as a law enforcement operation with military support. By Christmas 2025, President Trump approved the operation in principle. The exact execution date would depend on weather conditions and final intelligence confirmation. The original plan called for execution on New Year's Eve, but meteorological conditions forced a postponement. Throughout the holiday week, Delta Force operators and Night Stalker pilots remained on standby, waiting for the order that would launch them into history. On the evening of January 2, 2026, President Trump gathered with his national security team at Mar-a-Lago, Florida. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time, Trump gave the final execute order. Good luck and Godspeed. Within minutes, aircraft began lifting off from 20 bases scattered across the Western Hemisphere, converging toward Venezuelan airspace in carefully choreographed waves. The first wave consisted of electronic warfare aircraft and stealth platforms designed to blind Venezuelan radar systems. U.S. Cyber Command launched coordinated attacks against Venezuelan military networks, reportedly causing widespread disruptions to communications and power systems. President Trump later suggested the United States had blacked out Caracas using a certain expertise that we have, a clear reference to cyber capabilities. EA-18G Growlers and F-35s began flooding Venezuelan airwaves with electronic noise, forcing radar operators to increase power output. The moment those radars powered up, they became beacons for AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles. Within minutes, 12 major radar installations across northern Venezuela went dark. F-22 Raptors established air superiority over Caracas, their stealth characteristics making them virtually invisible to surviving Venezuelan detection systems. Venezuelan Su-30 pilots, who attempted to scramble from Valencia Air Base, received radio warnings in Spanish: "Return to base immediately or you will be destroyed." Facing American fifth-generation fighters already dominating their airspace, the Venezuelan pilots returned to their hangars. At 2:00 a.m. local time, Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from Navy destroyers began impacting targets across northern Venezuela. Ammunition depots at Fort Tiuna military base erupted in secondary explosions, the night sky illuminated by cascading fireballs. Fuel storage facilities at La Guaira port were struck, sending columns of black smoke rising into the pre-dawn darkness. Air raid sirens wailed across Caracas as panicked civilians fled to shelters, convinced a full-scale invasion was underway. Venezuelan military units rushed toward the explosions on the city's periphery, exactly as American planners intended, leaving Maduro's compound with reduced protection. While explosions rocked the outskirts, helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment crossed the Venezuelan coastline, flying barely 100 feet above the waves. The pilots navigated through mountain passes, using terrain-following techniques, using the very geography Venezuela believed would protect its capital as concealment. At 2:01 a.m. local time, the lead helicopter carrying Delta Force operators reached the perimeter of Maduro's compound within Fort Tiuna. Venezuelan ground forces opened fire on the approaching helicopters, striking one aircraft, but failing to bring it down as the armored machine continued its mission. The American helicopters returned fire with overwhelming force, their door gunners and accompanying attack helicopters suppressing defensive positions. Fast ropes dropped from hovering helicopters as Delta Force operators descended onto the compound grounds, their movements rehearsed to perfection. Inside his residence, Maduro awoke to the sound of explosions and gunfire, immediately understanding the moment he had feared had arrived. He attempted to reach his steel-reinforced safe room, but Delta Force operators moved with speed Maduro couldn't match. They breached doors with explosive charges and flooded rooms with overwhelming tactical precision. They intercepted Maduro before he could reach the safe room door, tackling the Venezuelan president and securing him with flex cuffs in seconds. His wife, Cilia Flores, was secured separately, as FBI agents formally placed both under arrest on charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy. By 2:16 a.m., just 16 minutes after the first helicopters arrived, Maduro and Flores were aboard an extraction helicopter lifting off from the compound. Cuban security personnel who attempted to resist were killed in the firefight. The Cuban government later confirmed that 32 of its citizens died during the operation. The extraction helicopters raced north across the Caribbean, escorted by fighter jets and attack helicopters, providing continuous protective coverage. By 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time, General Caney confirmed that the helicopters carrying Maduro had crossed into international waters beyond Venezuelan retaliation. Maduro was transferred to the USS Iwo Jima, an amphibious assault ship positioned in the Caribbean, where he was photographed blindfolded, wearing a gray Nike sweatsuit. President Trump posted that photograph to Truth Social, showing the former Venezuelan president holding a plastic water bottle, his face covered with soundproof headphones. Later that day, a C-17 Globemaster III transport aircraft carried Maduro to Stewart Air National Guard Base in New York. He was helicoptered to Manhattan, transported through the city in an armored motorcade, and processed at a Drug Enforcement Administration field office before being jailed. On January 5, 2026, Nicolás Maduro stood in a Manhattan federal courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit, facing charges of narco-terrorism, conspiracy, and cocaine importation. Before entering his plea, Maduro declared, "I am the president of Venezuela. I consider myself a prisoner of war. I was captured at my home in Caracas." Both Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge ordered them held without bail pending trial. The Russian-made air defense systems that were supposed to protect Venezuela had failed completely, unable to stop a single American aircraft during the entire operation. Military analysts noted the S-300VM systems were designed for a different era of warfare, incapable of countering the networked, electronic, warfare-heavy American assault. The success of Operation Absolute Resolve demonstrated the overwhelming superiority of American military technology and the irreplaceable value of human intelligence on the ground. President Trump declared that no nation in the world could achieve what America achieved that night, calling it one of the most stunning displays of military power in history. The operation that captured Nicolás Maduro lasted just 2 hours and 28 minutes from first strike to extraction confirmation. It proved that with sufficient intelligence, adequate preparation, and overwhelming force, even the most protected targets in the most defended locations could be reached. And it sent an unmistakable message to dictators, terrorists, and narco-traffickers everywhere. American justice, when it finally comes, arrives without warning and without mercy. The legal and geopolitical implications continue to unfold. International law experts have raised serious questions about the operation's legality. Democratic senators have demanded war powers votes. Foreign leaders from Mexico to the Vatican have condemned the action. But for the operators who planned and executed Operation Absolute Resolve, the mission was a success by the only metric that mattered. They brought their target back alive, and they all came home. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that subscribe button. The full story of what happens next, the trial, the political fallout, and Venezuela's future is still being written. Thanks for watching.